دكتور جاي شافر، مدير مكتبة جامعة ماساتشوستس تقاعد من سنة 2004 ل 2016. مختص في إدارة المعلومات وإدارة المكتبات. عمل سابقا في الديجيتال ميديا، ويهتم كثيرا في التنمية التشاركية. أنا ما راح طويل، راح أعطيه الكلام من خلال الفترة اللي بده إياها. بعدين اللي عنده أسئلة محتمل يسأل، ونشوف خلال التجربة تبعه. فبدنا شوي هدوء لأنه اسم الله القاعة كثير ناس وشيء منيح كثير يعني.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here. I appreciate the invitation. I was in Beirut a year or so ago and worked with the American University of Beirut. I was very happy to return. Thank you for having me. Yes, now we go to the next slide. When I received the invitation to speak today, I looked at the mission statement for the conference, which is extremely comprehensive. It covers just about everything that we are talking about in libraries and information services today. And outlines, I think, very clearly where libraries are today and where we will be going in the future, especially as you look at the variety of information services and new technologies that we're faced with. Looking at the list of conference topics, it's very comprehensive and a little overwhelming to think that you're going to be able to cover all of this in 3 days. It's a very good summary, I think, of what is facing each of us in our jobs in libraries today. But it made me wonder a little bit about what can I add to this discussion. Any good library director can talk for an hour about just about anything, and so I don't say that I'm an expert in any of these topics on technology. And I'm sure that the speakers you have for the rest of the program are much more knowledgeable in some of these areas. So what can I add to the program today? First of all, I'm old, which I think has some benefit. I have many years of experience managing change in libraries. I've worked in public libraries, special libraries, academic libraries. I've had many years of attending conferences to discuss exciting technologies. Sometimes these are transitional technologies, sometimes they're successful technologies. And I've had many years of working with library users, library staff, and importantly, my bosses, to implement those two terrible words that we know, efficient and effective change. I want to emphasize the relationship we have with our supervisor or our boss. I think that one of the things we don't do as librarians enough is manage up. No matter what position you're in, you have a boss. The dean of the libraries has a boss, and the provost has a boss in the president. So always think about managing to the upper levels. I wanted to put into perspective a little bit the discussion about change and technology in libraries. In many conferences like this, we talk about technology as being a significant force for the present. And we don't think very much about how technology has impacted the library profession for a long time, for a very long time. In fact, I think libraries are some of the first institutions to start implementing technologies. It goes back, way back to 1952 when we started using teletype for interlibrary loan. Instead of using the mail to send requests, paper forms back and forth, libraries started using modern communication technology, teletype, to communicate between libraries. And then in '59, the Xerox machine became a very big part of libraries so that we could copy things. And that has significantly changed the way libraries work. We started database searching back in 1966, before many of you in this room were on this planet. I do remember, unfortunately, some of the early days of database searching. 1967, OCLC began as a library cooperative for cataloging mostly. And then 1971, the MARC standard was established. And this created a standard format for recording bibliographic data across all types of libraries so that we could share machine-readable cataloging. Email has been with us since 1985. It's changed our life significantly, but that's a long time. This is not a new technology any longer. World Wide Web started in 1989. Gopher was one of the first active attempts to create internet connections through World Wide Web, and libraries were instrumental in forming that project. And then in 1998, Google happened, and the rest is history. So we do have a long tail of technology in libraries, and libraries have been using technology to do what we do for a long time. One of the things that I think is extremely important to anyone, whether you're a library director, a department head, just one of the very important individuals on the main line, is to think strategically about what we're doing as individuals and as organizations. So one of the things I like to do is think strategically about what are my top 3 priorities in getting things accomplished. What top 3 things should I be trying to do to focus my efforts? And I will ask you these same questions. What are your top 3 priorities? What goals do you have for implementing new services, facilities, technologies, or other kinds of changes in your library in the next 3 years? Think 3 years is a long time in this historic period. So you can talk about 5-year plans and 10 years plans, but I think 3 years is about as realistic as we can be. And then, one of the things that when I go to conferences like this, I leave and I'm all excited because I've heard wonderful ideas that I want to go home and implement. How can I do this? How are my colleagues' ideas going to be implemented in my institution? One of the things that we have to be very realistic about is what are the obstacles to implementing what we need to do to achieve the top 3 priorities, the aspirations that we have. So I also want you to think about what are your top 3 obstacles in achieving the things that you want to achieve. Just to give you a little insight into the thinking of some of my colleagues back in the United States, I did an informal survey of directors of the Boston Library Consortium and received responses from 5 public universities, 5 private universities, 1 health science library, and 1 private research institution. So these are a good variety of libraries, and the directors in the Boston Library Consortium get together regularly and discuss their aspirations. So I thought it would be interesting to share with you what my colleagues aspire to do in the next 3 years. I categorize these in a variety of pretty broad areas so that we can discuss them further. The most highest ranked response was aspirations to change library services. Next, and very close, was library facilities, things having to do with changing library facilities. Working with staff was next in ranking. Having aspirations to change the integrated library service or the discovery systems. And then finally, only 2 responses about aspirations to work with collections. Being an old collection development librarian, this kind of hurt my feelings, but it, I think, shows you that collections and collection development are not the top priorities in libraries, as they were for centuries. So aspirations in services. What kinds of aspirations do my colleagues have? The most highest ranking were new services. Services that we don't currently offer but we feel are required by our communities. And you'll be hearing about these later in the conference because these are all part of that long list of discussion topics. Research data management is a very big topic in the United States right now. Federal funding agencies like the National Science Foundation have started requiring libraries and researchers to put together data management plans when they ask for money so that the funding can be assured for retention and preservation of the research data that National Science Foundation is paying for. Data visualization is another important topic right now. Data management, GIS, all kinds of new services in a new area, not really part of the library in the past, but definitely a part of the library in the future. Then the next area of ranking was outreach to faculty. After new services, librarians are trying to outreach with the faculty, the people who are most important to the constituency in an academic research library. So these included things like onboarding new faculty, faculty orientations, marketing and outreach to faculty, assessing what is the right library for the campus. This is trying to, again, build that stronger bond with faculty, the bond which has weakened some, I think, over time as we provide collections and information in a different manner. And then the third ranking group was instruction. Librarians who want to work with the communities in library instruction. This is mostly related to information literacy, technology literacy. You might have heard the phrase fake news. That's a big topic in the United States right now, and how libraries can work with students in the area of critical thinking, and especially information literacy for first-year students. The second area that we're looking at is facilities. And I think in asking these questions, I anticipated facilities to be the #1 aspiration of my colleagues. And in reality, it really came in second to services. General facilities improvements is a high priority, I think, with most librarians today. This is implementing learning commons, new space for students, technology-rich space for students, getting students into the library using a variety of methods, including cafes and coffee machines, and improving the way that the libraries work with faculty and students to be a center of learning on the campus. Part of these new facilities are what we call digital scholarship centers, or maker spaces. Maker spaces is kind of the new catchword in libraries in the United States. This includes a lot of things. It can include digital media, it can include 3D printing, it can include sewing machines, it can, just about include anything that allows the students to have hands-on experience in making things. Another topic that I was surprised only one response, but many libraries, again, are talking about integrated service points. Traditionally in libraries, we have what we would call the circulation reserve service point. We would have the reference service point. And over time, as reference services have become less visible to students, because students and faculty use technology for the reference information seeking, much in the way they used to use reference librarians. So we find ourselves with a reference desk staffed with librarians waiting for people to come to ask questions. And this is very inefficient, because we have other things that those librarians can be doing instead of waiting for people to come ask questions. And so one of the things we're looking at is how do we create one service point in a library that has all the services, the collection, the reserve collection, the interlibrary loan service point, the circulation service point, and some beginning level of reference help, so that students are not confused by not knowing exactly which desk to go to get assistance. This is, I think, another way of reducing staff costs, so that we can really use the staff that we do have in the most effective way possible. And then related to facilities improvement, of course, is moving collections off-site. And this is a very controversial discussion, but one that most large academic libraries are having, because to do the improvement to the facilities, to do the learning commons, to do the digital scholarship center, you have to create space within your current facility, and to do that you need to move collections away. This creates a whole other discussion about cooperative collection development, retention of last copies, and how do we provide and ensure that we always provide access to the print collections that we have, but don't duplicate excessively the print collections that we have. How many copies of Scientific American do you need in one city? So the third area of aspirations regarded staffing. And I think this is something that impacts all of us every day of our life in the library. Number one is changing library culture, more inclusion and diversity in our staffs, hiring and retaining staff, restructuring staff organizations from specialists to generalists. As we have fewer staff, we need to have greater general coverage of the information world. Hiring additional staff. This talks about trying to hire staff with new skills, things like instructional design, digital scholarship support, etc. And improving communication issues. Who among us is not always trying to improve communication among the staff and with the administration? And a thing that surprised me a little bit was that we had a strong response of librarians who are looking at the integrated library system, the discovery platform. The new term, I think, is library services platform. This is a discussion that has been going on in libraries, I guess, since OCLC started, about how do we provide greater access to the collections and the information world. one reason I'm a little surprised that this was such a high response on the aspiration list is there's some feeling that the integrated library system is really for librarians and not for the users of the library. That while we use the ILS for organizing our information resources, and we also use it as an inventory control system, like most of the library patrons don't go to the integrated library catalog for the first wave of information searching. ILSs are very expensive. It seems that we're always searching for the next generation of perfect integrated library systems. And many are starting to question, is this really a good investment? How good does the integrated library system have to be? And do users really care? Librarians care deeply, but when you ask a user what's their first point of accessing information, I would fall over dead if somebody said the library catalog. And then we have some things talking about collections. And again, these are something we always think about, but usually they're not at the top of the list anymore. This is the balance between investment in print collections and digital collections. Most of us, I think, have given up that discussion. Most of the money now goes into digital collections. We do try to maintain print collections as far as monographs, but as far as the serial budget, it's, I would say, 99% in digital. And then expanded journal database subscriptions. Again, this used to be the #1 priority that we all had as librarians, and is now further down on the list as we look at new services and facilities and how libraries are changing. So when I asked what are the big obstacles in achieving your aspirations, the most common off-the-cuff response that I got, and the one that probably came to your mind immediately, was funding. Funding is the biggest problem. Funding is the only problem we have. If we had all the money in the world, everything would be fine. I was surprised by the results. Again, grouping in fairly large areas. Staffing is the #1 ranking obstacle that my colleagues in the Boston Library Consortium saw. Funding is right up there, #2, and actually got one more response as a #1 response. 5 people said staffing was their primary obstacle, and 6 people said funding was their primary obstacle. And then working with administration is always seen as an obstacle, and then a few other things that I'll cover. So in some of the responses, people were pretty general. They would say staffing or funding. So we'll just take that for what it is. But I think the most important obstacle that people saw is change management. How do we in libraries work with our staff to create a work environment that is inspiring to the staff and provides the kinds of services, collections, and facilities that today's users need. I'm sure you're going to recognize these phrases that came from the survey, because I'm sure that you have either said them or heard them in your own facility. Making the leap from incremental change to disruptive change. And what we've been describing so far has been fairly incremental change over decades. And now people are feeling the word disruptive change much more appropriately describes the environment we find ourselves. the inertia of established ways of doing things. People do this because that's the way we've always done it. And how do we get people to say we can change how we've always done it? Deeply embedded ways of working, continuous work environments. Again, this is kind of going back to the doing things the way we've always done them. And then there's the issue of having to do traditional things, the print things, while we're trying to do the new things, the digital things. How do you give up what you're trying to do new things? We know that we're all working pretty much at full capacity. So to do new things, the best way to do it is to give up some of the old things. But that's very difficult, especially if that's the way we've always done it. Again, stop doing things, and then manage competing priorities. We have significant priorities from various parts of our community. We have the students' priorities, we have the faculty's priorities, we have the administration's priorities, we have staff priorities, we have library directors' priorities. How do you manage all of those and make sure that you're keeping your eye on the aspirations and not only on the obstacles? Hiring and retention is a significant discussion in the libraries. The inability to attract and retain librarians and staff, lack of trained librarians coming from library schools, difficulty of finding appropriate staff, especially for digital services, and then the need for staff training. I was a little surprised that staff training didn't come up in the aspirations, because as we look at staffing and the issues that we have with staffing, training is one of the strongest ways of working with staff to make sure that you are making the most of the existing staff that you have. And then there was one individual who was very frustrated with faculty unions on his campus, so that was his number one obstacle at the moment. Funding, yes, funding is an issue. I am not going to lead you down a path that says we have all the money we need. But it's not necessarily that we need more money, it's sometimes that we need to spend the money we have differently. In the United States, especially in the private institutions, fundraising is a significant part of the library director, library dean's job. This is working with donors, usually alumni, community foundations, etc., to get additional money, additional dollars into the library or into the university. And even working with funders, it's difficult to get traditional donors to think about new library services. New donors like to buy extra Gutenberg Bibles for special collections. But what really we need the money for is getting donors to think about the library as a new way to have donors help us finance the facilities, renovations, new kinds of digital information resources. And usually the donors are of an age, like my age, that they're used to thinking of libraries as a print repository, and that's what they want to contribute to. I think, in my experience, budget flexibility is one of the greatest things you can have in a library. Many times the library budget is built into silos. You have the collections budget, you have the staffing budget, and then you have a little budget here for facilities and other kinds of services. If you're able to use that kind of money in a flexible way, so that if you have a vacancy in staffing, and you have what we call salary savings, so when a vacancy occurs, there's nobody earning that salary, so that salary is in the budget, but it's not being spent on that person. If you can save those salary savings and use them for facilities projects or use them for special collection purchases, it gives you a greater flexibility in how to manage the library. Unfortunately, in many institutions,